Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all doing good and well. So you might remember a couple of weeks ago I posted a video saying I was going to be diving back into the Malazan Book of the Fallen series, having read up to book 4 on my previous reading. So I'm going to start by rereading The Gardens of the Moon, the first book in its epic fantasy tale by Steven Erikson. And here we go again, here it is. And I have to say, this time round, I enjoyed Gardens of the Moon quite a lot more than the first time round. In fact, to the point I thought this was, really quite good. And I was thinking, was it the same person reading this book first time round? But saying that, I can see why maybe I felt a little bit bewildered on the first read, because Erikson does start very quick with lots of events happening. In fact, a couple of pretty major events early on in his story. And he's not afraid to introduce his concepts and his ideas very, very quickly. And I think if you're new to epic fantasy or not used to that sort of level of layered, epic fantasy complexity, we're going to get lots of characters thrown at you left, right, and centre with their different motivations and their different reasons for doing what they do. It's like suddenly a mystery, and with that sort of level of, that kind of intense reads that this is, I think, first time round, you can see maybe why you get people that are fairly divided on this book as to whether or not they really like it. But yeah, I think second time round, I actually think maybe if you've read Gardens of the Moon once and didn't enjoy it, maybe it's worth reading again, because I do think there's actually a lot of entertaining moments as well in this book that I maybe didn't pick up on the first time round either, and there's some good humour. There's really exciting battles and individual conflicts and duels, and just some great, really well imagined things. I mean, the whole floating fortress idea with Moon's spawn is really quite, really quite something, and stunning visually to think about. And there's a lot to like in Gardens of the Moon, I think, on my reread. So those are my initial thoughts and introduction to this video. The next part of the video, I'm going to be giving a bit more of a background to this story and this book in particular, for those of you perhaps that aren't familiar with Malazan series, because I'm going to keep this part of the video spoiler free. But once I've done this part, I will give a spoiler warning, and then I'll be talking about some of my favourite passages from the book, quoting little parts of the book maybe here and there as well from each part as I go through that part of the video. And that'll be the final part of this video. So next up, I'm going to be talking about the background, the context of this story. What is it all about? Why bother with it? Well, at the very sort of, you get introduced to this Malazan Empire idea very quickly, that is ruled by this Empress Lysine. And underneath Empress Lysine, there's this whole kind of command structure. And you have a lot of the key players in this particular book in that command structure. As I say, there's divisions within and kind of internal conflicts. Even within some of the characters, like Ganos Paran has this kind of his own kind of internal conflict in the story, and he's kind of pretty high up in the rankings of the Malazan Empire, in the ranks. And you also have these characters called the Bridge Burners, who are really interesting kind of military kind of characters, a lot of them. But then you have like mages, who have their influence on things because they're all pretty powerful characters. And all of this within just the Malazan Empire. So I haven't even talked about the gods or the characters in Darujistan, who are, Darujistan is like the last kind of independent city throughout a lot of this entry in the series. And they are trying to defend, a lot of the characters from Darujistan are trying to defend their own interests, defend their city. And you also have, as well as Malazan, right, and the Malazan Empire characters, and as well as Darujistan characters, you have like really big players or gods or ascendants meddling in the affairs of things to try and get things their way, if you like, and get things swinging their way in their favour too. And sometimes their interventions are puzzling, they don't make sense. Which keeps things really kind of quite interesting. With you think, well, why has this happened? Why has that god done that in the story? Why is he meddling? Why has this god possessed this character, for example? So lots of just really kind of questions arise very quickly, as I say. But that's a bit more kind of background. So you get a lot of characters. You've got the Malazan Empire, characters in Darujistan, the gods. And there's a couple of kind of like these ancient kind of race kind of characters, I think, like the Tilani Mus and the Teast Andy and the Jagat, and you sort of ask questions about these sorts of characters too. And a really interesting character called Anamanda Rake, who becomes apparent fairly soon in the story, and his parts to play here are very, very interesting, because I find it hard at times to know kind of which side is he on, what's he trying to do, even though it seems like he's very anti-Malazan Empire, particularly Empress Lacine, it seems. So, there's sort of all sorts of things to enjoy, and then at a granular level as well as you read through this story. So now, going to move on to the spoiler parts of all of this, and go into some of my favourite parts of Golem to the Moon, some of my favourite moments. So we're going to start with page 77 of Book 1, Pale, which is a descriptive point of Tatasale's point of view after Taishren's kind of treacherous moment where he overdoes his powers in the siege of Pale and kills a lot of Malazan people, soldiers, I think. And so we're going to go to page 77, wasn't it? So you get to that page quickly. I just like Erikson's descriptiveness in this part. So he says, this is describing Tatasale and how she's feeling and what she's observing after Taishren has unleashed all of his powers and his sorcery. So it says, her ears numbed and body throbbing as if her flesh itself gasped for breath. Tatasale was slow to grasp that the sorcery had ceased. Even the voice shrieking in the back of her mind had fallen silent. She raised bleary eyes to see Moon Spawn, billowing smoke and ablaze in a dozen places on its ravaged mien, moving away, pulling back. And by this point, Moon Spawn is a floating fortress. So it just creates this kind of really cool imagery in your mind. And I like that kind of descriptiveness that Erikson uses from time to time in this book. Now, I also kind of really enjoyed the second book, Darujistan, and a lot of its passages here, particularly involving Crocus, this thief, and the moments where he is suddenly picks up the coin, the Opon coin, and becomes a coin bearer. Not a ring bearer like Lord of the Rings, but a coin bearer. But that means that he's suddenly a key character in all of this, and you wouldn't necessarily think it. He's just he's this thief character that isn't necessarily in much of a powerful standing in the story initially, but I love how he becomes a part of all his events, and the kind of suddenly you're wondering what he's going to get up to next, and how what he gets involved in is going to be influenced by Opon, this god of chance, who likes to mess around with things, and it gets interesting in the second book because of that, I think. Now moving on to the third book and the mission, and I'm going to select a part of this I really liked. So Paran and Tatasale, seemingly an unlikely pairing, develop a romance. But come to think of it, I think the reason the romance develops is because I think they feel like they've both got in common that they both feel like they've been used a bit by the powers at play in the Empire. And they come together because I think they both feel a little bit like victims, if I can say that. Feel free to put in the comments what you think of the Paran and Tatasale romance, but I really liked this bit where they come together, and I think this kind of surprised me as well. I don't remember enjoying this bit, but I enjoyed it a lot more and appreciated it more this time around on my reread. So this is describing Tatasale and how she feels when Paran kind of makes a move romantically towards her. So she says, she felt the heat in his words triggering a smouldering fire beneath her stomach, and her gaze slid away from the deck as she turned to face the captain. Though she voiced no reply to his question, her answer was clear. He took her hand, surprising her with such an innocent gesture. So young, she thought, and now he's leading me into the bedroom. Well, you can guess what happens next after that. So I just liked the way that kind of romance that all developed too. Now, another part of the story I really liked. So in Assassins, I think we get to see the humour of Quick Ben and Kalam quite a bit. And I really liked their exchange, which is on page 380. And I think this is where Quick Ben and Kalam are both sort of, debating whether they just run away from everything and their responsibilities, to the Empire and just get away from everything. So Quickburn says, personally, I'd rather we just dropped everything and ran away from it all, from the Empire, from Darujistan, from war. But try convincing the sergeant to do that. That's Whiskey Jack in the story. He's loyal to an idea, and that's the hardest kind of turn. And Callum just nods and goes, honour, integrity, all that expensive crap. So yeah, it's good little moments like that as well. Don't know if that's the best example, actually, that's the one I could find. Page 503 is where Perrin discovers what actually has happened to Tattersail, which I think is quite an emotional moment in the story, because obviously he had that attachment to her, and he realises at that point that she's been reborn in as this kind of, because of the intervention of this elder god called Crawl, she has soul shifted. So even though she was killed, she has transferred, like a bit like a kind of reincarnation idea. I guess she's gone into another body of this Rivi child, as if I've got that right. So in page 503, and this is in the Gadrobi Hills part of the book, part 5, and it's where Perrin is talking to an old woman about what's happened to Tattersail, and this child is involved, and who we find out is indeed Tattersail, kind of reborn. And so the old woman's talking at this point, and she says, the child says, you need not grieve. The woman you know has not passed through the arching trees of death. Her journey was beyond the lands that you can see, beyond those of the spirit that all mortals sense. And now she has returned. You must be patient, soldier. You will meet again, so this child promises. And I just really like that. I just think there's something kind of ties up an end in the story a little bit with what happened with Tattersail and everything before. Book 6, The City of Blue Fire. I really liked this book a lot. I think that there was something where this kind of reconciles a lot of the previous parts of the Gardens of the Moon, and things start to make a lot more sense when you get to the City of Blue Fire, before it all gets kind of thrown around again in the last book of the last part of this book. But the City of Blue Fire I really enjoyed because of that, because it kind of reconciles a lot of what's been going on. So if you're confused, book 6 is a good point at which to take a breath, and it takes more time with, like, examples like Anamanda Rake's conversation with Barak really does well at kind of recapping some of the events of the story before, and that's quite useful as a new reader in particular as well, I think. But it's not that I'm going to talk about here. It's page 540, the fight between Rallick Nom, this assassin, and Ocelot, this other kind of assassin. They both have different interests. They're both trying to protect their own interests and protect a particular character here. Rallick is trying to protect this character called Cole from Ocelot, and there's a big duel. And I really like the descriptiveness. And this is how I really like Erikson and how he describes kind of fights. And this is on page 540. So I'm going to find it hopefully quickly to not keep you waiting too long. So here we go. This is the final part of that fight when Rallick is making his kind of final attempt to sort of kill off Ocelot. And he says, it says, with all the remaining strength in his left arm, Rallick slammed his knife into Ocelot's stomach. Link snapped and the blade sank to its hilt. The clan's leader body doubled up, curling around the embedded weapon. Gasping, Rallick lurched forward and hammered the other dagger into Ocelot's forehead. So, really kind of, again, pretty vivid description of a fight. And I like that with Erikson, that he makes sure you know exactly what's going on in these standoffs and in the battles. And I really like that about his writing. So moving on to the last book, and my favourite bit here was Anamanda Rake becoming the Black Dragon to face off against this demon lord that the adjunct set against him. And I really like this bit. This is page, I think, 680. Yep, I've made a note. Here we go. So this is the passage where he's I think he's already changed the dragon by this point. So it goes, the air roared around Anamanda Rake as he plummeted, but he made no other sound, his warren drawn in tight around him. Below, now sweeping lazy circles over Darujistan, was the Dun Dragon, Rake's equal in size with the power to match But it was a fool for hunting him in the streets below. Rake carefully spread his wings, angling towards the Ghislaine lord. His hind limbs reached down, talons spreading. He threw in the air around him, preparing for a burst of power. He was Gerald, Ghislaine, Teast Andy, and darkness was his home. So it's kind of like a big moment for Anamander Rake in the story, I think, and his just displaying the power of that character, and pretty cool character really. So there you go. That's the last kind of favourite moment I was just going to talk about. And yeah, I hope you liked this video. It's kind of like, I mean, I would call it a recap. As I say, I'm not doing a full-blown summary or anything like that. This is both, the first part of the video is for those of you unfamiliar with the series. The second part is maybe just to share some of my favourite moments. It's not a full summary of this particular book. I didn't want to do that. I thought that would be really, really difficult to do. So just to explain that as well here at the end. But I'm looking forward to moving on to book 2, to Dead House Gates next time, which I dare say will be in a few weeks. So from me, take care everybody as always, and bye for now.